You owned 4 car washes. Combined, they pulled in $340,000 last year. You started with $4,000, an inheritance from a grandfather you barely got to know, sitting untouched in a savings account for 2 years until a Tuesday afternoon in March changed that. Nobody at your job knows. Your mother still thinks you work in IT and do something with cars on the side. That's not exactly wrong. It's also not close to right. The $4,000 came from your grandfather Walt, a man you saw maybe 6 times a year growing up, who fixed lawnmowers in his garage until he was 79 and left behind almost nothing except a paid-off house, a 1987 truck nobody wanted, and a small life insurance payout split 3 ways between you and your 2 cousins. Your share landed in your checking account on a Thursday with a letter from a law office you didn't recognize. You didn't celebrate. You didn't know how to feel about money that existed because someone you barely knew had died. So you moved it into savings and left it there, the way you leave things you don't know what to do with. For 2 years, it just sat. You checked the balance occasionally, watched it earn $11 or $14 a month in interest, felt vaguely guilty every time you looked at it, and went back to your actual job processing claims for an insurance company, the kind of job that pays enough to be comfortable and not enough to ever feel ahead. The trigger wasn't dramatic. You were driving home on a Tuesday, taking the back route because the highway was backed up, and you passed a self-serve car wash you'd driven by 100 times without really seeing it. 4 bays, faded blue paint, a hand-lettered "For Lease" sign, zip-tied to the chain-link fence. Half the vacuum hoses were missing. 1 bay had a hand-painted "Out-of-Order" sign that looked like it had been there through at least 2 winters. You didn't think anything of it the first time. You thought about it the second time, 3 days later, when you drove past again and noticed a different car using the 1 working bay despite everything else being broken. Someone was paying $3 in quarters to wash their car at a place that looked abandoned. That detail stuck with you longer than it should have. You went home and looked up who owned it. It took less time than you expected, maybe 20 minutes. The owner was a man named Sal, 68 years old, who'd run the place for almost 3 decades and was now splitting his time between Ohio and Florida, mostly checking on it by phone, mostly not checking on it at all. You called him on a Sunday. He sounded surprised anyone wanted it. He told you straight, the equipment was old but functional. The lease on the land had 4 years left at a rate that was, by his own admission, stupidly low because I never bothered renegotiating, and he'd take $4,000 for the equipment, the brand name, and the right to assume the lease, mostly because his son in Florida had been telling him for 2 years to just walk away from it. You ran the math before you called him back. A self-serve wash with 4 bays, even running at maybe 40% capacity because of the broken equipment, was still pulling in customers at $3 to $8 a wash depending on the package. Sal's own rough numbers, the kind kept in his head instead of a spreadsheet, put gross revenue somewhere around $1,800 to $2,400 a month as it currently sat, half broken and barely advertised. Lease was $650 a month. Water and sewer ran close to $300. Electric for the vacuums and dryers, another $180. After expenses, the place was probably clearing $600 to $900 a month, doing almost nothing to earn it. You did the math 3 times. The number held. You bought it for the full $4,000, every dollar Walt left you, and you didn't tell anyone. Not your mother, not your cousins who'd spent their share on a kitchen renovation and a vacation respectively, not your girlfriend at the time, who found out 2 months later by accident when she saw a charge from an equipment supply company and asked what it was for. The first repair cost $340, a part for the broken bay that took you 3 phone calls and a YouTube video to figure out how to install yourself. The second repair, replacing 2 missing vacuum motors, cost $580. You did both on a Saturday, in jeans you ruined permanently, hands smelling like degreaser for 2 days afterward. By the following month, all 4 bays worked. Revenue jumped almost immediately, not because anything was marketed differently, but because a fully functional car wash with working vacuums looks like a business instead of an abandoned lot. You netted $1,140 that first full month. Your coworker at the insurance company made roughly that much in 2 weeks of regular salary. Nobody at the office had any idea. You didn't stop there, though you also didn't rush. For 8 months, you just ran it. You learned which days brought the most traffic, Saturday mornings, and the day after it rained. You learned that one vacuum always jammed if it ran for more than 4 hours straight without a reset. You learned that quarters add up faster than you'd think and slower than you'd hope, both at once, depending on the week. The second wash came almost by accident. A man named Carl, who owned a 2-bay wash 20 minutes away, mentioned at a supply store that he was getting too old to keep climbing into the equipment bays for repairs and was thinking about selling. You'd never met him before that conversation. You bought his place for $11,000, financed, partly through the cash flow your first wash had built up over those 8 months, and partly through a small loan you paid off within 14 months. 2 bays, older equipment, but a better location near a strip mall with steady foot traffic. By the second year, you owned 3. The third came from a foreclosure auction, a property you'd been quietly watching for months because it sat on a busy corner near a gas station, the kind of spot where a car wash should have been printing money but wasn't, because the previous owner had let it run into the ground through neglect rather than bad location. You picked it up for $24,000, more than the other 2 combined, because the lot itself had real value beyond the equipment. The fourth came 2 years after that, and by then, you weren't calling Sal-style sellers anymore looking for desperate deals. You bought a functioning, modestly profitable wash from a retiring owner at something closer to fair market value, $58,000, because by that point, you understood the math well enough to know exactly what a functioning wash was worth and exactly what it would pay you back over time. 4 locations now. Combined gross revenue last year sat just over $340,000. After equipment maintenance, leases, utilities, the part-time guy named Andre you hired to handle quarter collection and basic upkeep across 2 of the locations, and the various unglamorous costs of keeping pressure washers and vacuum motors alive, you netted just under $190,000. Not life-changing in the way a tech exit or a viral business would be. Completely life-changing compared to the insurance claims job you still technically hold, mostly because quitting it would mean explaining to people why you no longer needed it. Your coworker Brian leases a brand new F-150 Raptor, black, with a sound system he upgraded himself for another $2,400 on top of the $920 monthly payment. He talks about it constantly, the horsepower, the off-road package nobody at a desk job will ever use, the way it turns heads in the parking lot. He asked you once, genuinely curious, what you do on weekends, since you always seem a little tired on Mondays. You told him you do some maintenance work for a friend's business, true in the loosest possible sense. He nodded, filed you under unremarkable, and went back to describing his truck's turbo lag to someone else. You drive a 2014 Toyota Tacoma you bought, used for $9,200 4 years ago. It has 118,000 miles on it, and a dent in the tailgate from a falling vacuum motor you were transporting badly. You've never once thought about replacing it. Your cousin Denise, who spent her share of Walt's inheritance on the kitchen renovation, called you 18 months ago needing $6,000 for a car repair and a medical bill that landed in the same month. You could have sent it without feeling it, the equivalent of about 11 days of cash flow across your 4 locations. You didn't send it immediately. You asked her to walk you through her actual numbers first, the way you'd learned to with everything else by then. You found that her car insurance was overpriced for her coverage level, found a medical billing error worth $1,400 that the hospital corrected after 1 phone call, and helped her set up a payment plan for the rest that didn't require borrowing anything at all. She still doesn't know what you actually own. She thinks you did well investing and leaves it at that, which is close enough to true that you've never corrected it. There's a particular kind of loneliness in that, in knowing you could solve a problem in 60 seconds and choosing instead to teach someone how to solve it themselves over 3 phone calls instead. It isn't guilt, exactly. It's something closer to the discomfort of understanding a situation more clearly than the person living inside it, and knowing that handing over the answer too quickly would only postpone the actual lesson. You think about Walt sometimes, more than you expected to when this all started. He fixed lawnmowers in a garage that smelled like gasoline and motor oil until he physically couldn't anymore, made enough to be comfortable, never flashy, never visible beyond his own street. You wonder occasionally if he'd recognize what his $4,000 became. 4 locations, $340,000 a year, an empire that looks like absolutely nothing from the outside. 4 ordinary buildings on 4 ordinary corners that most people drive past without registering at all. You think he probably would. It's the kind of thing he'd have respected, quietly, without saying much about it, the way he did most things. On a Sunday morning last month, you stopped by the original location, the 4-bay wash with the faded blue paint, now repainted but still modest, still unremarkable from the road. A man was using the same bay where you'd once seen someone wash their car, despite everything around it being broken. You didn't go in. You sat in the Tacoma for a minute, watching steam rise off the pavement in the early light, and thought about how the entire thing started with a sign zip-tied to a chain-link fence that you'd driven past 100 times before you actually saw it. You drove home after that, past Brian's neighborhood, past the kind of houses with the matching trucks and matching landscaping packages, and pulled into your own driveway in a truck nobody's ever been impressed by. The dent in the tailgate caught the morning light for a second, the way it always does. You didn't think about fixing it. You thought about Andre's text from 2 days ago, a routine update about a vacuum motor that needed replacing at the 3rd location, the kind of message that means everything is working exactly the way it's supposed to. Quiet, automatic. 4 locations paying you whether anyone's watching or not, whether anyone ever finds out or not, started with $4,000 from a man who fixed lawnmowers and never once asked to be noticed for it either.